game, but there was one recurring theme that we kept hearing about that people did not love, and that was, you guessed it, fumbles. Hey, all, Tyson here, designer of Phantom Epoch. We're about 3 weeks out from the second printing and Exiles of Volan campaign expansion Kickstarter, and we couldn't be more excited to be going back to Kickstarter. I thought I would take some time to talk about the biggest piece of feedback that we received about Phantom Epoch on the critical side of things. Overall, I think that most people who played Phantom Epoch and reviewers who played it really loved the game. But there was one recurring theme that we kept hearing about that people did not love. And that was, you guessed it, fumbles. Now, some people didn't mind fumbles. And they got far enough in the game to see all of the mitigation for fumbles and how fumbles can even be turned into something good. But a lot of people heard about fumbles or played the first mission or two and fumbled a bunch and hated it. And we totally understand why. First of all, actually, let me talk about what a fumble is in the first printing. A fumble is essentially a miss, but it also means that you can't continue performing attacks. You're so off balance that you just can't go on the offensive anymore on your turn. Now, in most games, and I think Phantom Epoch is unique in this regard. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. In most games, you can only play one, maybe two attacks if you have special abilities in a turn. Now, in Phantom Epoch, you can essentially play as many cards as you want under your AP value, your given AP threshold. Which means it's not uncommon to have 4 or 5 attacks lined up in a turn. And when you fumble on the first one of those attacks and you don't have anything to mitigate it, and all of a sudden you can't do those next 4 attacks, it hurts. It really sucks. And honestly, what we kept hearing and what we agreeing with is it's not fun when that happens. Now, once you get a little bit further in the campaign and you get all of the mitigation for it, it becomes so much less of a problem. But in the early game, when you're first starting, fumbles disproportionately hurt the players. And we've heard your feedback in that regard. We agree with it, and we've done something about it. So let me just talk a little bit about the new rule for the second printing of Phantom Epoch. And in doing so, we're going to switch over to Tabletop Simulator, and I'm actually going to demonstrate it a little bit. So first of all, when you roll a fumble now, rather than just simply missing your attack and not being able to continue attacking, you're presented with a decision. Do you accept the fumble as is, same as it's always been, or do you overextend yourself to ensure that you strike a hit, but get knocked down in the process? So if you have a way of standing up or a way of mitigating the knockdown, you can keep on attacking. And you don't necessarily miss the attack, even though it becomes a 0. Let's demonstrate this a little bit. So we're going to start off by doing a couple attacks on my ranger here. Now, I'm not really set up in any way here on this character to mitigate either a regular fumble or mitigate the knockdown. So essentially, with just my one multiple target attack here, and with no planning ahead on my turn, things haven't really changed. Generally, in the first printing of Phantom Epoch, and in a situation like this one, generally it's probably best to go pretty safe with my first couple of attacks, roll the blue basic attack die, rather than risk a fumble on my first attack. So I go ahead, I roll my attack, I roll my second attack, and let's say my third attack is against this Growling Archer here. And I decide, okay, for this last one, I want to go for broke. I'm going to roll the blitz die. I'm going to risk a fumble. I don't have any future attacks anyway. Now I'm presented with an option. I accept that miss. Okay, whatever. It's a hit with 2 attacks. I miss 1. No big deal. Or because this Growling Archer actually has a -1 guard value, I could choose to overextend myself to convert that fumble into a 0, which because of the negative guard value would actually do 1 damage. Now it would knock me down if I did this. So next turn, I would have to make sure that I place a movement card so that I have my 1 movement point to stand up again. But at least I hit with that attack. Now, maybe for 1 damage on my last attack where I didn't have any other attacks lined up anyways, maybe that knockdown is really quite worth it there. But I have the option. It gives me the choice. So let's look at another example where I'm more set up to take advantage of that choice. Now, on this character, as a secret character, don't tell anyone that I'm showing you this character on the stream. This character, I chose boots that give me -1 move on all of my movements, which sucks, but it makes me immune to stun and knock down. Now that becomes really interesting when I can convert a fumble into a 0 and get knocked down, except I can't be knocked down. So on this character, look at this. I have 3, essentially possibly 6 attacks lined up, and I'm not scared of fumbling and losing them. So if I wanted to, I could go all out with the blitz die on every single one of these attacks. Maybe some of them I want to guarantee a hit. Maybe something only has 1 or 2 HP, and it would be better to just guarantee a hit. And I might go with the basic attack die. See, this new rule with fumbles, rather than taking away choice or taking away our old rules, all the mitigation that's all throughout the game, new dice, new equipment, new action cards, all kinds of things that are meant to balance out the fumbles. It gives me more choices. It doesn't take anything away. It doesn't wreck the balance. It just gives me more choices. And in fact, it makes certain things like these boots much more interesting options. So I can build around preventing knockdown so that I can convert all of my fumbles. Or if I'm okay with fumbling, I can maybe use attachments to allow me to fumble, but keep on attacking, which have always existed in the game. So this is the new rule for fumbles in Phantom Epoch. And at first we intended this just as a variant. We playtested a whole bunch of possible variants, but this one felt so good at all of the options that it opened up that we ended up making it a core rule for the second printing. Rather than limiting player choices, rather than forcing you down a path, rather than the previous way of you roll a fumble and you get stew about it until your next turn. Now, when you roll a fumble, you immediately begin thinking, how can I make the best of this bad roll? Now, fumbles, as I said at the outset, disproportionately affected players at the beginning of the game before they got a lot of mitigation. Now, with this new rule, you have more options available to you at the start of the game, but you might find that maybe it doesn't come into play so much later in the game. So it does give you options later in the game as well. But this rule helps you in the early game when you're first getting into Phantom Epoch to not be thrown off by fumbles before you have a way of dealing with them. So let us know what you think of this new rule. We're really excited to share it with you all. We're really excited for the second printing. We've heard only good things about pretty much every other aspect of Phantom Epoch, but understandably, we heard a lot of bad things about the fumbles, people not loving them. So we heard your feedback. We think we've addressed it with this rule without upsetting the balance of the game, and we hope you love it as much as we do.